There is a realm in the spirit where results do not respond to noise but to authority. Many people pray, but few pray in alignment with the laws that govern answers. The morning is not just the beginning of a day, it is a spiritual gate. Whoever controls the morning controls the outcomes of the day. That is why dangerous prayers are not prayed at any time, and they are not prayed anyhow. Come, they are prayed with understanding, timing, and authority. Come, morning prayer becomes dangerous when the one praying understands that the spirit realm is already active before the physical world wakes up. Battles are negotiated, permissions are granted, and directions are set before people open their eyes. When a believer rises early, he is not trying to impress God, he is positioning himself ahead of events. Come, he is standing where decisions are still being written. Prayer at this time is not begging, it is legislation. Come, dangerous morning prayers work because they enforce light. Darkness thrives where there is no command. Silence in the morning is an invitation for confusion, delay, and opposition. When words are spoken early, aligned with truth and authority, they set boundaries for the day. Circumstances do not randomly happen. They obey spiritual instructions. When a believer speaks in the morning, he is not predicting the day, he is commanding it. Authority in prayer does not come from shouting or emotion. It comes from identity. Those who know who they are do not struggle to be heard. Dangerous prayers are prayed from covenant consciousness. The one praying knows he is not a stranger speaking into the air, but a son enforcing what has already been granted. This is why some prayers work instantly while others remain unanswered, not because God is far, but because authority was absent. Morning prayer becomes warfare when it confronts resistance before it manifests. Many people wait for problems before they pray. Come, but dangerous prayers deal with problems while they are still ideas in the realm of the spirit. When you pray early, come, you intercept plans, you dismantle strategies, and you cancel permissions. By the time situations try to arise physically, come, they find no legal ground to stand. Consistency is what turns prayer into power. One morning of prayer may give encouragement, but a lifestyle of morning prayer establishes dominion. The spirit realm respects patterns. When you consistently rise early to pray, the day begins to submit to you naturally. Opportunities align, favor speaks, and delays lose strength. Not because life became easier, but because authority was established. Dangerous morning prayers are not long because of repetition. They are strong because of alignment. They are rooted in truth, released with faith, and sustained by discipline. Such prayers do not just ask God to bless the day, they command the day to obey divine order. When the morning is secured, the rest of the day has no choice but to follow. This is why those who understand this secret do not joke with early prayer. They know that whoever controls the morning determines the victories of the day. Morning prayers become effective not because of emotional intensity, but because of alignment with spiritual authority. Emotion can stir the heart, but authority moves realms. Many believers assume that the power of prayer lies in how deeply they feel, how loudly they cry, or how desperate they sound. While sincerity matters, the spirit realm does not respond to emotion. It responds to authorization. Authority is what gives prayer weight, and authority is rooted in understanding identity, position, and divine order. Spiritual authority comes from knowing where you stand in relation to God and creation. When a person prays without this awareness, prayer becomes an appeal rather than an enforcement. Morning prayer is not meant to be a moment of emotional release. It is meant to be a moment of spiritual legislation. Come, at the start of the day, the believer is expected to take responsibility for the hours ahead. This responsibility cannot be carried by feelings alone. It requires authority, because responsibility without authority leads to frustration. Emotion fluctuates, but authority is stable. Come, if prayer depended on emotion, then results would be inconsistent because human feelings change daily. Some mornings you feel strong, other mornings you feel tired or distracted. Authority, however, does not depend on mood. Come, a believer who understands spiritual authority can pray effectively even when emotions are quiet. This is why some prayers whispered calmly carry more power than prayers shouted in desperation. Calm authority is often more dangerous than loud emotion. Authority in morning prayer is also connected to order. God is a God of order, and the morning represents divine order in time. When a believer aligns with this order, prayer gains structure and clarity. Instead of reacting to the day, the believer defines it. Emotional prayer often reacts to fear, anxiety, or uncertainty, but authoritative prayer acts from assurance. It does not ask the day what it will bring. It declares what the day must become. Another reason authority matters more than emotion is because the spirit realm recognizes rank, not passion. In any system of power, rank determines influence. Passion without rank may be sincere, but it is limited. When a believer prays with authority, he is not trying to convince God, he is enforcing what God has already established. This enforcement mindset changes the tone of prayer completely. Come, words become commands rooted in truth rather than wishes driven by need. Authority is built through alignment with truth. A believer who prays authoritatively understands God's word, submits to it, and agrees with it. That this agreement gives legal backing to prayer. Emotion may push someone to pray outside of divine will. Come, but authority keeps prayer within divine boundaries. When prayer stays within those boundaries, resistance weakens naturally. The issue is rarely that God refuses to answer. The issue is often that prayer lacked lawful grounding. Morning prayer aligned with authority also produces confidence. Confidence in prayer is not self-confidence. It is God confidence. It is the assurance that heaven supports what is being said. This confidence removes fear from prayer. Fear contaminates prayer because it introduces doubt. Emotional prayer often carries fear, especially when the heart is uncertain about outcomes. Authoritative prayer carries peace because authority rests in assurance, not anxiety. When authority governs prayer, words become precise. Emotional prayer tends to be repetitive and scattered, while authoritative prayer is focused and intentional. Precision matters. In the spirit realm, clear declarations produce clear results. This is why understanding spiritual authority simplifies prayer. The believer stops trying to say everything and begins to say what matters. Authority also shifts prayer from pleading to commanding. Pleading assumes distance, while commanding assumes access. Morning prayer is not the time to act as though God is far away. It is the time to act as though heaven is open and responsive. Authority recognizes this openness and speaks accordingly. Without authority, morning prayer may still bring comfort, but it will struggle to bring control. Comfort soothes the heart, but control shapes outcomes. The dangerous prayers are not designed merely to make the believer feel better. They are designed to make the day submit to divine order. This submission requires authority, not emotion. This is why understanding spiritual authority transforms morning prayer from a routine into a weapon. When a believer rises with this understanding, prayer becomes intentional, confident, and effective. The morning is no longer greeted with uncertainty, but with command, because authority has taken its rightful place over emotion. Spiritual timing is one of the most misunderstood dimensions of effective prayer, yet it is one of the strongest reasons certain prayers produce immediate and undeniable results. Timing is not about convenience. It is about alignment with moments when spiritual activities are most responsive to intervention. The spirit realm operates with order and seasons, and prayer that ignores timing often feels sincere but yields limited outcomes. When a believer understands spiritual timing, prayer stops being random and begins to intersect with divine windows where resistance is weaker and outcomes are already forming. The morning is a strategic time because it sits at the boundary between what has been concluded in the night and what is about to manifest in the day. Decisions are not only made physically, they are influenced spiritually before events unfold. When prayer enters at the right time, it does not chase outcomes, it shapes them. This is why timing turns ordinary prayers into dangerous ones. The prayer itself may not change in wording, but its impact multiplies because it is released at a moment of influence. Many people pray reactively. They wait until pressure rises, fear sets in, or problems become visible. By then, processes are already in motion. Spiritual timing teaches a believer to pray proactively. Instead of responding to damage, the believer prevents it. Morning prayer functions as interception. It engages matters while they are still intentions, not realities. This early engagement reduces resistance because it deals with issues before they gain structure and strength. Understanding timing also brings sensitivity. A believer who values spiritual timing learns to discern when to speak and when to remain silent. Not every moment requires the same kind of prayer. Some moments require declaration, others require listening. Morning prayer is especially dangerous when it includes listening, because instruction received early saves effort later. Many struggles continue simply because the believer did not receive direction at the right time. Prayer that includes listening aligns the believer with divine strategy. Spiritual timing also protects prayer from frustration. Many people lose confidence because they prayed sincerely but saw no results. Often, that the issue was not faith or righteousness, but timing. When prayer is released outside the right season, it feels heavy and resisted. When it is released within the right window, it flows easily. Understanding this removes self-blame and discouragement. The believer learns to align rather than force. Timing makes prayer efficient. Instead of long battles, there is swift enforcement. This does not mean prayer becomes shorter. It means it becomes sharper. The believer stops fighting unnecessary fights. Morning prayer, when understood correctly, sets spiritual parameters for the day. Once these parameters are set, the believer does not need to keep revisiting the same issues throughout the day. What was settled early remains settled. Another aspect of spiritual timing is consistency. The spirit realm respects patterns. When a believer consistently prays at strategic times, authority is recognized. Consistency creates expectation in the realm of the spirit. Just as habits form in the natural, spiritual habits establish influence. When morning prayer becomes a pattern, it creates a spiritual rhythm that governs daily outcomes. This rhythm weakens surprise attacks because the environment becomes conditioned to divine order. Understanding timing also trains discipline. Waking up early to pray is not easy. But discipline is part of spiritual authority. The willingness to sacrifice comfort for alignment strengthens prayer. This sacrifice is not about earning favor, it is about positioning. The believer who honors timing proves seriousness. This seriousness attracts responsibility and influence in the spirit realm. Prayer that honors timing also reduces emotional dependency. When the believer trusts divine order, prayer becomes calm. There is no panic because prayer is no longer a last option. It is the first response. Morning prayer carries this calmness. It is not rushed because it is planned. It is not desperate. Because it is intentional. Spiritual timing reveals that prayer is not meant to fit into life. Life is meant to flow from prayer. When the morning is secured through prayer, the rest of the day follows that direction. Decisions become clearer, distractions lose strength, and opportunities align naturally. This alignment is not coincidence, that it is the result of prayer released at the right time. This is why understanding spiritual timing makes prayers dangerous. They arrive before resistance settles, before confusion spreads, and before delays solidify. When prayer meets the right moment, it does not struggle for attention. It is already expected, already aligned, already effective. Spiritual authority is the foundation that determines whether prayer becomes a request or an enforcement. Many people pray sincerely, yet their prayers sound like negotiations because they do not understand the authority behind prayer. Authority in prayer does not come from volume, emotions, or repetition. It comes from alignment with divine delegation. When a believer understands that prayer is not merely speaking to God, but standing in a position granted by God, the tone of prayer changes. It moves from begging to commanding, from hoping to establishing. Authority in prayer begins with identity. A believer who does not understand who they are will never pray effectively. No matter how long they pray, identity shapes confidence, and confidence shapes authority. When a believer knows they are accepted, empowered, and backed by heaven, prayer stops being uncertain. Words spoken from identity carry weight. The spirit realm responds to authority, not desperation. This is why some short prayers produce immediate results, while long emotional prayers struggle. It is not the length, it is the authority behind the words. Spiritual authority is exercised primarily through words. Prayer is a legal activity in the spirit realm, and words function like instruments of enforcement. Silence does not enforce authority, speech does. However, not all speech carries power. Authority-filled words are aligned with divine truth and purpose. When a believer speaks in prayer without understanding authority, words sound empty. When authority is understood, words become tools. Declarations are not wishes, they are alignments. They do not force God to act. They release what has already been authorized. Morning prayer becomes dangerous when authority is exercised early. Authority spoken at the beginning of the day sets boundaries for everything that follows. It defines what is permitted and what is denied. The believer does not wait for the enemy to act before responding. Authority anticipates. When prayer declares order, peace, clarity, and protection early, chaos struggles to gain access. This is why authoritative prayer is proactive, not reactive. Many believers struggle with authority because they confuse humility with weakness. True humility is alignment, not passivity. Authority does not mean arrogance. It means agreement with divine structure. Come. When a believer prays with authority, they are not elevating themselves above God. Come. They are submitting themselves to God's order and enforcing it on earth. Authority flows from submission. A believer who resists discipline, correction, and alignment cannot carry authority in prayer. Authority also requires spiritual knowledge. Ignorance weakens prayer. A believer must understand spiritual laws, principles, and boundaries. Authority does not function in confusion. This is why teaching strengthens prayer. The more a believer understands spiritual realities, the more precise their prayers become. Come, precision increases effectiveness. Instead of general prayers, authority produces targeted declarations. Instead of vague requests, authority produces specific instructions. Another aspect of authority in prayer is consistency. Come, authority grows with use. A believer who only prays when desperate will struggle to exercise authority. Authority develops through regular engagement. Morning prayer builds this consistency. When a believer repeatedly enforces spiritual order daily, authority becomes familiar. The spirit realm recognizes patterns. When authority is consistently exercised, resistance decreases. Authority in prayer also requires emotional control. Emotional instability weakens authority. This does not mean prayer should be emotionless, but emotions must not lead. Authority flows from conviction, not emotional fluctuation. Morning prayer helps regulate emotions before the pressures of the day. When authority is established early, the believer is less reactive throughout the day. Reactions give power away. Authority maintains control. Spiritual authority also involves responsibility. Authority is never given for personal comfort alone. It is given to maintain order, protect purpose, and advance divine intent. A believer who uses prayer only for selfish outcomes will struggle to sustain authority. Come, authority is strengthened when prayer aligns with purpose beyond self. Morning prayer that includes consecration, alignment, and availability strengthens authority because it positions the believer as a vessel, not just a beneficiary. When authority is understood, prayer stops being exhausting. There is rest in authority. Come, the believer no longer feels the need to convince God or fight endlessly. Authority trusts alignment. Once a matter is declared and aligned, the believer rests. This rest is not laziness, it is confidence. Confidence is a sign of authority. This is why dangerous prayers are not loud prayers, angry prayers, or long prayers. They are authoritative prayers. They are spoken from identity, alignment, knowledge, and consistency. When authority is exercised in the morning, it governs the day before the day begins, shaping outcomes, decisions, and encounters according to divine order. Spiritual atmosphere determines what can survive, what can function, and what can manifest within a space. Come, many people focus on praying about events without realizing that events are sustained by atmospheres. When the atmosphere remains unchanged, problems often return even after intense prayer. This is why understanding how to shift and govern spiritual atmosphere is essential for prayers that truly work. Atmosphere is not created by chance. It is formed by consistent spiritual activity, words, thoughts, and alignment. When the atmosphere is wrong, effort increases and results decrease. Every environment carries a spiritual climate. Homes, workplaces, cities, and even personal lives are influenced by unseen conditions that either permit peace, clarity, favor, calm, or confusion and resistance. Morning prayer is dangerous because it addresses atmosphere before activities begin. Instead of praying within a polluted atmosphere, the believer cleanses and establishes order first. This changes how the entire day responds. When the atmosphere is right, things flow without struggle. When it is wrong, even simple tasks feel heavy. Words play a major role in shaping atmosphere. Silence allows existing atmospheres to remain unchallenged. Complaints reinforce negative climates. Prayer, however, introduces intentional words that shift conditions. When a believer speaks peace, clarity, protection, and an alignment in prayer, those words do not vanish, they remain active. The atmosphere responds to consistent declarations. Over time, the environment begins to cooperate with what has been spoken. This is why repeated morning prayers build lasting change rather than temporary relief. Atmospheric control also requires awareness. Many believers are unaware of the environments they are operating in. They react to stress, fear, or confusion without realizing these are symptoms of a hostile atmosphere. Prayer that works begins with discernment. Morning prayer provides quietness that sharpens awareness. In this stillness, the believer can sense heaviness, distraction, or resistance and address it before it influences decisions. Discernment is weakened by noise and rush. Early prayer restores sensitivity. Another key factor in atmosphere is obedience. Disobedience pollutes spiritual climates. No amount of prayer can sustain peace in an environment where known instructions are ignored. Atmosphere responds to alignment. Morning prayer that includes surrender and correction cleanses the environment internally. When the believer adjusts internally, the external atmosphere responds. This is why some prayers fail despite sincerity. The atmosphere is resisting due to misalignment. Spiritual atmosphere also affects relationships. Many conflicts are not rooted in personality differences, but in unseen influences. When the atmosphere is charged with tension, misunderstandings multiply. Morning prayer that addresses atmosphere reduces unnecessary conflict. By establishing peace early, interactions become calmer and more productive. This does not mean challenges disappear, but reactions change. A peaceful atmosphere weakens provocation. Consistency is critical in atmospheric control. A single prayer can bring relief, but sustained authority changes climates. Morning prayer works because it is repeatable. That each day the believer reinforces order. Over time, disorder loses its grip. This is similar to how habits shape behavior. Atmospheres respond to repetition. When prayer becomes a daily practice, the environment becomes conditioned to divine order. Another dimension of atmosphere is thought life. Thoughts contribute to spiritual climate. Fearful thoughts invite heaviness. Faith-filled thoughts invite stability. Morning prayer aligns the mind before external influences flood in. This alignment protects the atmosphere of the heart. When the internal atmosphere is governed, external pressures lose power. The believer becomes stable regardless of circumstances. Spiritual atmosphere also influences outcomes. Opportunities, favor, and clarity thrive in the right climate. Confusion and delay thrive in the wrong one. Morning prayer does not force outcomes. It creates conditions where outcomes can manifest. This is why some people experience sudden favor without obvious effort. The atmosphere is cooperating. Atmospheric authority also reduces spiritual fatigue. Many believers feel drained because they are constantly fighting in hostile environments. When the atmosphere is governed early, energy is preserved. Prayer becomes preventative rather than exhausting. Instead of constant warfare, there is maintenance. The understanding atmosphere shifts prayer from crisis management to environment management. Instead of reacting to problems, the believer creates conditions that prevent problems from growing. This is what makes morning prayers dangerous. They do not only address visible issues, they reshape the unseen space where issues are formed, ensuring that what manifests aligns with order, peace, and divine intention. Spiritual consistency is one of the most underestimated forces in prayer. Yet it is what turns occasional results into sustained victories. Many people pray intensely for a short period and then stop when immediate answers do not appear. This pattern weakens spiritual authority because the spirit realm responds to patterns, not impulses. Consistency in prayer is not about repeating words mechanically. It is about maintaining alignment without interruption. When consistency is established, prayer stops being an event and becomes a system. Consistency trains the believer's spirit. Just as muscles strengthen through repeated use, spiritual capacity increases through regular engagement. A believer who prays consistently develops endurance. This endurance removes emotional dependence on outcomes. Prayer is no longer driven by urgency or fear, but by discipline and understanding. Morning prayer strengthens this discipline because it demands sacrifice of comfort and routine. This sacrifice builds spiritual stamina. The spirit realm recognizes consistency as seriousness. Sporadic prayer signals instability, while consistent prayer establishes credibility. This does not mean God responds based on effort, but spiritual systems operate on order. When a believer consistently shows up in prayer, resistance decreases over time. This is why delayed answers are not signs of rejection, but invitations to endurance. Consistency proves alignment beyond emotion. Consistency also protects prayer from distraction. Inconsistent prayer is easily disrupted by circumstances. Consistent prayer creates priority. When prayer is scheduled rather than spontaneous, it becomes non-negotiable. Morning prayer thrives here because it happens before distractions arise. This protects the believer from reactive spirituality. Instead of praying only when trouble appears, the believer prays because alignment is necessary. Another benefit of consistency is clarity. A regular prayer often feels confusing because the believer keeps restarting. Consistency allows themes, instructions, and patterns to emerge. Over time, prayer becomes clearer. The believer recognizes divine guidance more easily. Confusion decreases because alignment is maintained. Morning prayer provides continuity, which strengthens discernment. Consistency also builds spiritual memory. The believer remembers past victories and patterns of faithfulness. This memory fuels confidence. When new challenges arise, fear is reduced because the believer has evidence of stability. Prayer becomes rooted in experience, not hope alone. This confidence increases authority. Spiritual consistency also weakens resistance gradually. Some obstacles do not move instantly because they are sustained by long-term structures. Consistent prayer dismantles these structures layer by layer. While sudden breakthroughs are possible, many victories require pressure applied over time. Morning prayer applies this pressure daily. Each session reinforces alignment and weakens resistance. Another aspect of consistency is growth. Prayer that is consistent evolves. The believer matures in language, understanding, and posture. What begins as basic requests develops into declarations and alignment. Consistency allows learning. Inconsistent prayer keeps the believer at the same level. Morning prayer accelerates growth because it creates space for reflection and adjustment. Consistency also guards the heart. Emotional swings are reduced when prayer is stable, calm. Instead of being controlled by circumstances, the believer is grounded. This grounding protects faith during delays. Faith is not tested by intensity, but by duration. Consistency proves faith's depth. Spiritual consistency also affects timing. Prayer that is consistent often meets divine timing naturally. Instead of forcing outcomes, the believer remains aligned until the right moment. This alignment prevents premature action. Many failures happen because prayer was abandoned too early or action was taken without sustained alignment. Consistency transforms prayer from effort into lifestyle. When prayer becomes part of identity, it no longer feels burdensome. Morning prayer becomes natural rather than forced. This shift removes burnout. Prayer flows from desire, not obligation. Understanding consistency reveals that powerful prayer is not dramatic prayer, but faithful prayer. It is not about how strongly one feels, but how steadily one aligns. Morning prayer, practiced consistently, creates spiritual momentum. This momentum carries the believer through challenges, delays, and transitions without collapse. This is why prayers that work are not built on intensity alone, but on consistency. When prayer becomes stable, authority grows, resistance weakens, and alignment is sustained. They're producing results that last rather than temporary relief. Spiritual purity is a critical but often avoided dimension of effective prayer because it demands internal alignment, not just external activity. Many people want powerful prayers without addressing the condition of the heart. Yet prayer flows through the heart before it is spoken by the mouth. When the heart is polluted, prayer becomes weak, inconsistent, and easily resisted. Purity is not about perfection, it is about alignment. A pure heart is one that is honest, surrendered, and responsive to correction. Purity affects sensitivity. A polluted heart struggles to hear clearly. Distractions increase, conviction weakens, and spiritual signals become blurred. Morning prayer becomes dangerous when it flows from a heart that is clean and attentive. In such a state, prayer is precise. The believer does not waste time speaking out of emotion or confusion. Words are measured, aligned, and effective. Sensitivity is restored through purity, making prayer accurate rather than scattered. Spiritual purity also influences authority. Authority cannot function where compromise is entertained. Compromise weakens confidence, and weak confidence undermines authority. When a believer knows their heart is aligned, boldness increases. This boldness is not arrogance, it is clarity. The prayer spoken from purity carries confidence because there is no internal contradiction. The believer is not asking for what they secretly resist living out. Purity also protects prayer from self-deception. Many prayers fail because they are rooted in selfish motives disguised as spiritual language. A pure heart exposes motives. Morning prayer creates space for self-examination before the noise of the day. In this space, the believer can realign desires. When motives are corrected, prayer becomes effective because it aligns with higher purpose rather than personal convenience. Another dimension of purity is obedience. Obedience sustains purity. Prayer without obedience creates spiritual friction. When a believer prays for direction but ignores previous instructions, confusion increases. Morning prayer that includes surrender removes this friction. When obedience is restored, prayer flows. Resistance decreases not because opposition disappears, but because alignment increases. Purity also affects persistence. A polluted heart gives up easily. Guilt, fear, and condemnation weaken endurance. A pure heart is stable. Even when answers delay, faith remains. This stability strengthens prayer over time. Morning prayer reinforces this stability by daily cleansing the heart from accumulated distractions and influences. Spiritual purity also governs relationships. Unresolved offenses pollute the heart. Bitterness blocks prayer by distorting perception. Morning prayer that includes forgiveness clears internal blockages. When the heart is free from resentment, prayer is lighter and more effective. The believer stops praying against people and starts praying for alignment. Purity also impacts spiritual access. A clean heart moves freely in prayer. There is no hesitation, no fear of exposure, no internal resistance. Prayer becomes intimate rather than distant. This intimacy strengthens trust. When trust increases, prayer becomes confident. Confidence strengthens enforcement. Purity is also sustained through discipline. What the believer allows into the mind, heart, and environment shapes purity. Morning prayer sets boundaries early. By aligning the heart before exposure to media, conversations, and precious, purity is protected. This proactive alignment prevents contamination rather than reacting to it later. Spiritual purity also simplifies prayer. Complex prayers often hide confusion. A pure heart prays simply and clearly. There is no manipulation, no performance, no excessive explanation. Simplicity increases effectiveness. Morning prayer encourages this simplicity because the mind is less cluttered. Understanding purity reveals that prayer is not strengthened by effort alone, but by alignment. A heart that is clean does not struggle to pray. Prayer flows naturally. This flow increases consistency, authority, and sensitivity simultaneously. This is why dangerous prayers are not produced by intensity or volume, but by purity. When the heart is aligned, prayer becomes powerful by default. Morning prayer, rooted in purity, does not need to fight for effectiveness. It operates from alignment, clarity, and confidence, that producing results that endure. In conclusion, dangerous morning prayers are not about shouting louder, praying longer, or using special words. They are about alignment with spiritual laws that govern results. When prayer honors spiritual timing, it enters moments of influence instead of reaction. When it flows from spiritual authority, it enforces rather than requests. When it governs atmosphere, it changes conditions before problems take shape. When it is sustained through consistency, it builds momentum that weakens resistance over time. When it is rooted in purity, it gains clarity, confidence, and access. These dimensions work together, not separately. Remove one and prayer weakens. Engage all, and prayer becomes effective by nature. This kind of prayer does not wait for crisis to pray. It establishes order before the day begins. It turns the morning into a control room where outcomes are shaped, directions are set, and boundaries are enforced. As a result, the believer does not chase victories throughout the day. Victories follow alignment established in prayer.